Today, as you know, will be the topic about Simone de Beauvoir and feminism. Madame Gobeil Noël, as a good friend of Simone de Beauvoir, I'm quite sure she has to say many very, very interesting and I would say unknown things about her development as a feminist. Madame Gobeil Noël, as you know already, was born in Canada, and she actually had the contact with Simone de Beauvoir since she was 15 and wrote a letter to Simone de Beauvoir. Their meeting in Paris happened 3 years after this, actually Madame Gobeil Noël, as a journalist, had many times opportunities to make interviews with her, and not only with her, but also intellectuals, French intellectuals of that time, and American intellectuals like John Steinbeck, or French like Jean Genet, or Marguerite Duras, François Giraud, etc. Also she was in charge for Department for Arts and Cultures in UNESCO during 27 years. So how this context and experience is of course very fascinating for us, and I'm very happy to open today's floor about Beauvoir and feminism. So please,
okay.
Floor is yours.
Today is not like yesterday, it is a lecture, okay? And it is a question that is important to all of us, to women first, to men too, feminism. And what is the role of Simone de Beauvoir? Simone de Beauvoir was a writer. She wrote She Came to Stay, L'invité, a very good novel, very interesting, about a couple involved with a young girl. And she began to write essays on Sade, on La morale de l'ambiguïté. But at a certain moment in her life, she was a young professor at Marseille. And her friend Žan-Pol was she was near the Mediterranean, and he was with l'Atlantique. He was in Le Havre, and they were both separated. And it was very hard for her. She was in love with him and had difficulties at this moment and didn't know exactly what to write. And Jean-Paul Sartre said to her, "But Castor, Simone, Castor, you didn't have the same life as I had as a girl. It's another education." Simone de Beauvoir could not enter the university. At the time, it was not permitted. When I think of the facilities that you have today, the fact that you can learn, girls, easily, go to the university, make a doctorate, work, it's so different from her generation and mine. You see, we had 30 years of difference. In her generation, it was difficult. It was difficult also in my country, in Canada. I was the only girl at University of Ottawa when I began my BA and then MA, the only person, the only girl among a sea of men. And Sartre said, "Your education was not the same. You are a woman. What is it to be a woman? Why don't you get interested in that?" Simone de Beauvoir thought about it, and during 4 years, she began to work at la Bibliothèque Nationale of France every day, to work in biology, psychoanalysis, philosophy, everything, what history, for example, says of women. And this is how she built her famous book, The Second Sex. The Second Sex became, in a way, a Bible for women. And the Second Sex what a huge event, where Simone de Beauvoir presented the genealogy of feminism, of feminine oppression. She began to say, where did it begin? Why are women oppressed in every society? It was an original thought regarding the construction of the sexual identity of women. You all know our great formula. On ne naît pas femme, on le devient. One is not born a woman, one becomes a woman. These words were the flag for a whole generation of women who fought for rights regarding contraception, abortion, autonomy. The Second Sex is a big book in 2 volumes. I'm sorry it is not translated yet in Georgian. There were attempts, but it has not been done. Maybe one of you will try to do this task, which is necessary. It's a book in 2 volumes where Simone de Beauvoir wanted to say everything about women, a totalitarian view in a way. It is a kind of encyclopedia on the feminine condition, a revolutionary work justified by philosophical and historical position. What is her thesis? What is the message? And here is the important part. The inequality between men and women is a construction. It is built through ideology and history. Women must regain possessions of their destiny. They must not be the inferior sex. In other words, the other, the second. Since the beginning of humanity, women are determined and determine themselves in relation to men and not in relation with themselves. The woman is the non-essential. In front of the man, the essential being. He is the subject, the absolute, she is the other, and many times the object. The book shows 2 different approaches. The first book on myths and realities examine the condition of women through anthropology, philosophy, history, psychoanalysis, and through also literature. For example, regarding the biological differences between men and women, she says that it is not the difference between the sexes are not sufficient to explain the hierarchy between the sexes. She explained that most of the time, biology, history, and psychoanalysis are described or interpreted from a man's point of view. It is true. This is history. What I like most in the first part of the book, it is her story of the role of the myths about women in literature, in the construction of the masculine domination on women. Mostly the writers are attached to what we call l'éternel féminin. L'éternel féminin, eternal femininity. Through the images of the Virgin, the mother, the femme fatale, the prostitute, the woman as Mother Nature. These myths deny woman as an individual. This myth refuses her singular condition as a woman and tries to propose an ideal woman, always deceptive, as we can read in the works of D.H. Lawrence, Paul Claudel, the Surrealists, and others. Stendhal, the great author of Le Rouge et le Noir and the Black and Red, is the only author where the women are themselves and free, at least in love. Stendhal is an exception. It is my favorite novelist, by the way, and I know that Simone de Beauvoir loved him very much. It is in the second part of the book, L'expérience vécue, the living experience, that we meet that we meet her that we meet her well-known saying, "On ne naît pas femme, on le devient." One is not born a woman, but becomes a woman. In this book, she shows that women are built up by, there's a doctrine that is impart on themselves. There is no such thing as being a woman. It is quite a tragic description, vastly criticized by many people, mostly men and other women too. It is a vastly description of the education of women during her childhood. She's not educated. The boys are invited to be aggressive. Women are given dolls. The mothers ask submission. My mother used to tell me the most intelligent submits herself, and I wanted so much to be intelligent. The little girls they are asked to do dishes. They are to help the little brothers. It's already it begins in childhood, and then it pursues in adolescence, sexual initiation and relationships. For Simone de Beauvoir, she's writing 70 years ago, the woman slowly has to renounce her desire for her own subjective and authenticity. She has to accept a passive role, to be secondary, leaving the active role to men. She describes the life of the married woman, the mother, the prostitute, the old woman, who do not transform their life by work and creativity, and most of the time lead boring lives of servants of the family and as receptacle for the masculine libido, woman as object. This was written 70 years ago. It is important for you to think, is it still true? Is it now a new problematique? It is not only the oppression by men. Women participate also to their own oppression. This is very important. By denying their freedom, losing themselves to predetermined values, Simone de Beauvoir points 3 attitudes of what Sartre would call mauvaise foi, bad faith. There is the narcissistic woman relying on her beauty, her youth, who is an object. We see it in the publicity, in the adoration of the fashion model. A few in the last 80s and 90s, it was not the actress who was the important person, the important woman, it was the fashion model. Did you, I don't know if you noticed that. Also, another attitude is the woman as the great lover, la grande amoureuse, the great lover, who sees men as her God. In my generation, it still exists. In the former generation too, the man is everything for the woman. There is also the woman as the mystique, who's God, with God as the absolute. Finally, what is the conclusion of such a book? The last part of the book is titled The Independent Woman. Simone de Beauvoir advocates a whole series of measures to achieve this goal of independence. She demands that the modern woman transcends her condition to think, to act, to work throughout the same condition as men. I will quote her. The modern woman decides, and I repeat, to think, to work throughout the same condition as men. Instead of attacking men, instead of denigrating men, because women do that also. Men, instead of attacking men, of denigrating men, she declares herself as their equal. She demands equality. In 1949, among the social structures to achieve this goal, Simone de Beauvoir advocates the legalization of contraception, of abortion, women must be in charge of their bodies. This is very important. The bodies belong to women, to no one else. She advocates also, as you all know, the economic independence of women and their independence psychologically regarding men, which does not mean that love does not exist. But don't forget, men as an individual, men singular, it's very important. Men in possession of our body. When I spoke to her about this question, Simone de Beauvoir always put enormous pressure on the economic question. It was the key for her. It is through work, earning one's life, that women could close the gap between women and men. It was only through work, earning one's life, I repeat, that women could achieve real freedom. To conclude about the second sex, one can assert that the 20th century is the great book, it is in the 20th century, the great book of philosophy of women as image of the other. In the sense of the German philosopher Hegel, the image of woman alienated through masculine domination. Apart from philosophy, the second sex is also a political manifesto in favor of women's liberation, an inspiration for the feminist movement all over the world. I must say that. Simone de Beauvoir never imagined in 1949 that the publication of the second sex would provoke such an enormous scandal. Both Catholic and communist milieu condemned her severely. Her book was banned from most bookstores. The criticism in the press was devastating. She was insulted. She was declared an abject woman, especially because she has described women's sexuality. Mauriac, for example, a novelist, said horrible things about her, talking about her private parts, even calling her a vagina in the press. Simone de Beauvoir was not moved by the uproar. She had other books to write, the novel Les Mandarins, which gave her the Prix Goncourt. She had to write a memoir, the memoir of a dutiful daughter, and then the 3 big books of memoir which followed. It was an enormous success, an illustration in action in her own life of what she meant by the second sex. It was the beginning of the books of memories for a very large public. She worked, she traveled, she was in love, she was a world celebrity. She formed with Jean-Paul Sartre this very special couple invited all over the world. She was a special person. I had to fight myself very much more in psychology, in my own being, out of Catholic descent. Simone de Beauvoir was a little girl very loved in her youth. It gave her an enormous backbone. The insults would not move her. They're not pleasant. As I told you yesterday when I went to restaurants with her and we were attacked by Catholic women saying to me and to her, "What do you do with this young girl? You are a scandal," and all this. She just would write us and say, "Madeleine, let's go out." And we would go out in silence, not too happy, but you know, she had what we call a real backbone, which is given sometime by the youth, by the family. And oh, by the way, despite this uproar, she sold 22,000 copies in a few weeks, and more than 1 million copies of the second sex within 40 years throughout the world. It's her it's the Bible, it's the real book. Her daughter, who boasts, said sometimes to me, Freud spoke about the inconscient, Marx about the classes, and Simone de Beauvoir made the big book on women, and it's more and more true. In the 60s, she told me that the situation of women was at a standstill, at least in France, that there was even in France a certain regression. At the end of the 60s, there was a movement in France exemplified by Julia Kristeva, Antoine Haute-Fuc, Hélène Sixout, and others protesting against the hegemony of the second sex in the feminist debates, with an aim to re-evaluate in a positive way femininity and maternity. It began this division between the women who have a universal attitude and the women who insist on the difference between men and women. Of course, Simone de Beauvoir is for the universal attitude. In 1967, I gave Simone de Beauvoir Betty Friedan's book, The Feminine Mystique, and she discovered the battles and action of the American feminists. She became their iconic figure. The 70s were very rich for the feminist movement. There were in France and elsewhere many debates, many marches through the movement for female liberation. For the right to abortion especially, Simone de Beauvoir participated discreetly, but participated regularly in many debates and action organized by her young admirers and friends till her death in 1986. From the 90s and continuing today, the question of feminism, the question of gender, and I have here people in this room who are experts on gender, the question of gender is more and more studied in academic milieu, universities in America, in Canada, and Europe. There are chairs on women. There was a big commemoration for the 50 years of the second sex, and also when Simone de Beauvoir was 100 for a centenary, of course, she was dead. In 1986, there was an extraordinary international meeting with 500 participants of all the world to discuss her and made an appraisal. Myself, as I told yesterday, I organized a meeting in the Chinese University of Nanjing on Simone de Beauvoir because they were more interested in Marguerite Duras. And I told them that Marguerite Duras is a wonderful writer and has a good literary reputation, but it would be good also for you to examine the second sex and examine Simone de Beauvoir as a feminist. And now they have translated her books. In conclusion, I will be I'm temerary with you, and to assess what is going on today. Now it is the time that we must talk. What is going on today? I will tell you what I see, and it will be interesting for you to tell me what you see, okay? So, what is the reality of the condition of women today? I will try, however, to be modest, and I will talk about the West, about North America, and certain parts of Asia, Japan, Asia. I want to talk also about, if I speak what I say, I include Georgia. I will not speak about the condition of the woman in the so-called third world. I approach the condition of women in Arab countries, in Africa countries, in certain parts of Asia and Latin America through my work in UNESCO, and their conditions, especially in Africa and the Arab world, are still appalling. I'm not afraid to say so. There are exceptions, of course. There is always an elite, people who have money, social conditions, here also, I gather. But In many countries in Africa, women have no access to hygiene, to birth control. They barely can give food to their children. And in many countries, they are still sexually mutilated. It's an issue in itself. You know that in France, there is an enormous Arab population, 7 million. In Paris in itself, there are 400,000 women mutilated. There have been trials in France because in certain parts of the city, in certain parts of the Marseille, there are women who mutilate other women. Excision, cutting the parts, the clitoris, the part where women have pleasure. And it exists even in France, and there have been trials. What are the main points for this country? I will state the first one, and try to keep that in mind to see if it has any reality in your country. I will be proud to say that it is women's century, 21st century, not the 20th. There is a conscience of oneself. Women, I feel, are more at ease in their head and in their bodies. I see it in Georgia. This is my opinion with the women, students and professors I meet. They are at ease in their mind and their bodies. They are person. They live in a more detached way their lives as women, as full members of society. They are free to live the way they want, to marry or not, to live with a boyfriend. They are to have a free sexuality. Maybe it's reprieve, I don't know, you will the one to tell me, without being accused of being easy. And they don't care if they are accused of being easy. You see, men, as you already know, they have des petites amies, their little friends, girlfriends, and they are not accused of being easy. And more women who have, let's say, some aventure, some love affairs, are less and less accused of being easy. Their sexuality is free. I smile when I meet young women with such assurance, not knowing the fight of the previous generation and what we went through. Last night I had dinner with professors and wonderful women, the friends of Tamar. And I was so happy to know that each one of these women went to school and went to university and did their doctorate without hindrance for their family or the society. And their fathers was in favor of that. They didn't fight their women, their mothers, who said you must marry and forget all that and have children. So I saw what a difference. They didn't know what we went through, and I smile and I am happy about that, of their assurance. Let's now talk of language, and this applies especially in French. I was amazed by the new attitude of the French Academy, who had initially resisted the feminization of names. You see, in France now, we now say la ministre, elle est la ministre, instead of saying le ministre. I used to sign directeur, Madame Gobeil, directeur. Now, today, I would sign Madame la directrice, the directrice. Bon. And it was very interesting, this feminization of names, a great thing, because in the grammar, when you read the French grammar, there is a saying, le masculin l'emporte sur le féminin. The masculine is more important than the feminine role. Imagine, I remember as a young girl thinking, le masculin l'emporte sur le féminin. How come? Huh? It's quite interesting, especially in a society like France. It was all the way like that. And the Academy finally accepted to change the rule of the famous dictionary, thanks in a way to my friend Daniel Sandnav, who is member of the Academy, who is an anarchist, a feminist, and who tried to explain to these old men in green coats that it was important that women, there are 5 women in the Academy on the 40 academicians, and they are not in danger, but it took time for the Academy to accept women, and now to accept that the words, when you design a woman, you could call her in a feminine way, and she said it's less, Danielle told me, that less a question of equality, more of visibility and adopting the practice of the time. Huh? It's more. So, this was my first point. The second point, many rights have been conquered. The right of information, the right to control their bodies, the right to abortion, soon free procreation, freedom to marry, freedom to divorce, freedom for political rights. But there must be awareness, a constant vigilance, a constant attention. In certain countries, in the USA of Monsieur Trump, in Poland, in Argentina, in Salvador, women are fighting by youths, sitting, marches, manifestos, to keep the right to abortion. It was given, it can be taken back. A still constant fight for women to be in possession of their own bodies. Why are they denied? Huh? In Salvador, we gave the prize of Simone de Beauvoir, a member of the jury, to a young woman who came to Paris, a lesbian, I didn't know, a charming young woman who told me I'm a lesbian, bon, and who was a fighter for 40 women, for 17 women who were put in prison for 40 years because they had an abortion and that the hospital betrayed them. And this woman came and asked for our help with money, with lawyers. And in Argentina too, the abortion, the right was revoked. Huh? In Poland, there was also big marches because the Catholic group wanted, of course, to annul this right to women. So the question of abortion is very interesting. The third point I'm making, women work more and more and are mistresses of their financial economy. They are accepted in most of the profession, but there is still what we call le plafond de verre, the glass ceiling, to conquer the top jobs. How many women in the Georgian parliament? How many ministers? How many directors of museums, of hospitals, of university? Of course, you have Madame Salome, and Europe will be directed by Madame Ursula von Leyen, and Madame Christiane Lagarde has been named at the European Central Bank. I have noticed, by the way, that the people have talked less about the qualities and the competence of these women, but insisted on the fact that they were women. When they were chosen, they are women, more than they have this competence, they have this diploma, they have this experience. I have noticed also that on the question of work for women, one cannot escape the fact that in most countries, more women are less paid than men. Less paid than men. I don't know in Georgia. In UNESCO, it was the same. In Canada, it's a big fight. In France, they are paid 20% less than men. And they are trying to change that in Parliament. The fourth point, I have 5. Let's talk now about marriage and children. Most women like to be married and to have children. The second sex will not change that. Life will continue, and Simone de Beauvoir had to agree about that. In her last year, she said to me, yes, women want to be married and have children. There are more and more facilities for women, maternal aids, more institutions for the young children, and the grandmothers are very important. I don't know if here in Georgia they are important, but in France they are very important to help the women. All the women in France, most of the women in France work, not only because they want independence, but out of necessity. Out of necessity. And they count on women of my age and younger, and some of my colleagues who have little children, les petits enfants, are bored because they are asked so much. They love the little children, but it's on and on and on, and they have a lot of responsibility for the family. Can we assume that men have changed? Can we assume that? And can you assume that they have changed a little? You will tell me. And that they bring the young children to school? Do they bring them back from school? Do they accept some tasks in the house? It is not new. At the end of her life, in the 80s, Simone de Beauvoir was happy when she walked with Sartre in the Luxembourg garden to see young fathers pushing the carts of babies, and also with children on their shoulders. She said, things are changing. Yet, smiling, she said to me, men, if they do 10% of the chores in the house, of the work in the house, they think that they are fully participating in the task of the household. People have official attitudes, and in private, they are often very different. But let's be fair, a number of men show modernity and refuse the ancient attitude. Yes, I am glad to see that there are men in our assembly, and I hope that I will hear them on the question and what they think. But we must be, again, have very good attention, women, because there is also a backlash. A backlash provoked by Me Too and the Weinstein affair. In France, it's very, very important. Many men had problems with women, and it is my fifth point. A troubling problem is still the question of violence. One can say that the Me Too movement in the USA and other movements in different countries, in Canada, in France, in Spain, help to understand the sexual effects of power. Like harassing women in the workplace with verbal, with words, and physical aggressions in metros, in buses, and in the street, and in their homes, of course. In France alone, since January, more than 100 women have died under the blows of a husband or a companion. Yet, I must feel that there is a strong movement of resistance when we touch this question. People don't like to speak about that. the violence between the sexes. One cannot forget that the Me Too movement, the publicity around it, has had tremendous effects on the behavior of women in France, of men in France. There was a big question, enormous discussion, because men speak of gallantry, and some of the women, Catherine Deneuve and other women that I know, speak of gallantry. Everything will be loose, and there can be gallant harassment. Bon, we can discuss that. In conclusion, my friends, nothing is ever definitive. Nothing is one once forever. We have to be vigilant, and we have to have confidence for a better world and in the new generations. As Simone de Beauvoir said, to choose life is to choose the future. Thank you. Perhaps you could begin, my dear Tamar.
With questions? Of course, because...
or not only questions, a commentary. Sometimes you want to comment on what I said, or on the situation of women in Georgia. It's does not need. I prefer a conversation among us. I don't have the answer. You have more.
Yeah, exactly these changes that you have mentioned, from the time of Simone de Beauvoir till today, somehow in a very short time we can observe also in Georgia, because somehow relationships between men and women in beginning of 90s, they were totally different, and today among the younger generation, I hope they are also different, and this is positive dynamic in this regard. But somehow I would like to ask you to quote Simone de Beauvoir, that she has such a quote representation of the world, like the world itself is a work of men. They describe it from their own point of view, which they confuse with absolute truth. So it's somehow summarizing the whole history of mankind in some sense, when the science was done by men, and they were somehow holders of truth. What do you think? So, if Simone de Beauvoir would be alive today, so what she would say? Have things changed or not?
Yes, but she was a great admirer of men, like I am. Like I am. Men have done so much in the world. And we must not forget that and say, here we are now, and it's us, and we are the same, and we are better. We must have a real assessment of our role in the world, of what we are doing. But I think now there are so many people like you, Tamar, who are in charge. For example, of a department, she would be an admirer of that. She would say, bon, at least she made it. You see, she fought probably, she studied, she worked. But it's a new world. They were always very intelligent women, in the Middle Ages too. This is a lack in Simone de Beauvoir. She did not talk enough about the women who came before us, like Madame de Staël, for example, who was the enemy of Napoleon. He hated her so much for her writing that he exiled her in Switzerland, and she could not be in France for, I think, 20 years. But no, I think it's, for myself, I think it's better. I think there are more and more women in the workplace, more women in science. Very important. I am satisfied. I think we must work more. And I think also that mothers be more protective of their daughters and pushing them and encouraging. I notice all the time how women are crazy about their boys, their men. You see, l'homme. Bon, and they are very severe on their girls, I think this is finished. Boys and girls must work together. I see also the friendship between the sexes is different. The young women talk more easily with men than in my generation or in the generation of Simone de Beauvoir. But she did it very well. She was an equal to Sartre, and Sartre always thought that she was. He told me that when and what is left for the femininity? Many good things, because women care. They care about the others, about children, about men. I see sometimes in Tunisia, in France, women in power dominating men. Bon, it's not also an ideal. To be equal is better. To have our qualities is better. To not be, if you're also, yesterday you talked very well to me about the classes in this country. It's different. You have different philosophy, different societies, different nations.
Yeah. So you quoted many times this very famous statement of Simone de Beauvoir that one is not born as a woman, but one rather becomes a woman. Yeah. And actually this statement became also the basis for gender studies as general, as you have mentioned. But she has also, with this being and becoming, also another very famous statement that one is not born a genius, one becomes a genius. Yeah? Actually, even today, we hear very often this question: why in the history of the mankind there were so less genius female artists or female componists and so on, and why there were no scientists, female scientists and so on. So where were these genius women? Let's say so, yeah. Somehow Simone de Beauvoir was thinking that this feminine situation that was till her time, it was rendering this becoming for women, becoming genius, particularly impossible. These opportunities of self-realization, would you say that now in the overall in the whole world are somehow more in better situation, or
yes,
somewhere?
But I'm not interested so much in genius. I'm thinking of the common woman. How can she get out of the situation? If you go in the third world, the third world, it was also our world before. And you see how the little Arab girls, the little African girls, when they are young, they are so joyous and they are beautiful, and they wear little skirts. And suddenly, around 10 years old, 11, the veil, and they must serve at home. They are the second servants of the household. When you are in this position, when it is determined that you become the servant, you become the one who works, who is in second. To be a genius, and even in men, often there is a lack of equilibrium, a lack of. It's very difficult when you think of Proust, you think of Kierkegaard. You think of all the Melanie Klein, I'm now a woman, but it's, I don't know. I'm questioning. I was not when I was your age. I was les génies, to be le génie, to be the genius. How wonderful, and it's true. It's wonderful to be Melina or Anna Arendt. Bon, but you must study their story. It's a story of work, of femininity is not there too much. The woman who achieved, like Madame von Leyden, who is going to Europe, is a mother of 7 children. Imagine the servants who are there and how she is helped. Even a member of the parliament said, how can she head the commission, being a mother, you know, of 7? She should be in charge. She should take care of her children. Bon, it's very difficult to be to achieve in a very grand manner. You were they happy persons? And when you think of Kant, Hegel, they were lone souls. Sartre thinks that a genius is a célibataire. And in a way, he was also a célibataire living in a room.
Actually, Simone de Beauvoir has also such a very sad statement about this. So she writes somehow that no one knows me or loves me completely. I have only myself. So behind of the statement, you can really see really a lone person somehow. So
a person.
Maybe whole intellectuals are more or less alone. Who knows?
Don't forget that Simone de Beauvoir had no time for fools. Many people, you see, pretend to love Sartre to attack Simone de Beauvoir. I've seen it often. But Simone de Beauvoir had a schedule like a military person. You see, in the morning, she takes coffee, in later years, a vodka. And she worked. And nobody, you see, there was not a phone call, nobody, she worked till 2 o'clock. At 2 o'clock, she received a person like me or other friends, but you could come not at 5 to 2 or 5 after, at 2 o'clock. She opened the door and here she was. And 4 o'clock, if we were in a restaurant dining, it's 4 o'clock, she must go and work with Sartre. And they work together, as you saw yesterday, you know, they are together. So it's a life of work, a lifetime of work. This is how one becomes a genius. Think of Einstein, thinks of the Nobel Prize, thinks of the scientific. So think of the great painters. They have an idée fixe. So the intellectual is often a person alone. Also, if you live alone and not, there is also a great treasure in maternity. Some women told me that the great experience of life, the great moment of their life, and that is unique. And even there's a philosopher called Françoise Héritier. She has a theory that men oppressed women because they cannot bear children. It's very hard for men. They are not the ones who bring men in the world, or women, but mostly men. They have to pass through a woman. And it's a compromise. This is the life of the sexes. And often, but how is it that men wanted to put women under control? Because to be sure also that they were the father of this child. It's a big, big question.
Yeah, Madeleine, you told me that recently Julia Kristeva made call to you and said that she has actually new hypothesis. And this is against of Simone de Beauvoir, so to criticize her ideas. So could you say
Julia
more
Kristeva,
about Kristeva's ideas?
Yes, I know Julia Kristeva too. Julia Kristeva is so keen on maternity. And by the way, she had an handicapped child, which is a great tragedy in her life, and she worked a lot for the handicap movement to help. Imagine, she married one of the great writers of France, Philippe Solers, and she is a very big mind, achieving in France, a Bulgarian lady, and she had this thing. But for her, the maternity is very important. So she's very angry at Simone de Beauvoir, who showed, it is true, she showed that the end of adolescence for the women, all this thing of, will she be chosen? How will we choose a man? How do we come together alone? It's a real difficulty. Also, the change in the body was difficult for her. Some women go through that in an easy fashion. She was courageous enough not to take an attitude, you see, but this is why the second sex is so strange and appalling, and also because we feel that all this she felt, also the men, the women being betrayed, the idea of this unique love that will be love, all this was very difficult. But Kristeva attacked her on that solidly, and also other women. For them, la maternité is so important.
Yeah. So about this issue, so maternity and somehow women, men, maybe there is to think also about this statement of Simone de Beauvoir when she actually makes the accent about these cultural issues that many define it as a human being, and actually in Georgian language we have also that actually katsi and human beings, they are like with the same word sometimes, so you can say same word katsi, and it means as a man and a human being as well, and woman is defined as a female. And whenever she becomes as a human being, she is said to imitate the male. It means that somehow when a woman pretends to be considered like a human being and not like the second sex, then people are saying that okay, she imitates the male.
It's a subtle question.
Yeah, somehow I guess still till today in the 21st century, more or less we are facing this problem. That, for example, societies are considering some women who are successful or famous and so on, that they are imitating males.
Yes, then women in
or
that
they are
case,
imitating male language or male attitudes of behavior. Mostly it's said about women in politics, for example, in Georgia.
In politics, it's true. It's true. And because some women want power so much, the question of power is very important. Simone de Beauvoir was very cautious about that. In the fact that, she didn't went in society, she didn't give conferences. She thought that it was by her writing that she would have this glory that she wanted to have as the want of a young girl. But it is true that it's not very pleasant for women and men to imitate. I know that in offices, some women are terrible to other women. And so there is also a question we must discuss in ourselves, but men must discuss too. I see all my friends go in psychoanalysis and try to understand themselves and be good, but what about men? What are they doing to understand women? What are they doing to help them? And not also to be slave of the woman. You have this in the novels of La Femme Fatale, you have in the great novels men slaves to the bodies of women in sexuality. You have all that. It is true. But yesterday you asked me, as a person who was in charge of men and women in UNESCO, a team of 40 people, not a lot, just 40. They were men and women. Did I act? I told the staff that my principle was work. What I love was work, and also to be on time, and this pleased me. And what I tried to do was to make each colleague, each a member of the team, responsible. The ones, for example, who were doing something with the theater, I thought, this is your responsibility. You are working on cinema, you must be thorough on that. You must be complete. I didn't want to take everything myself, to be the only Madeleine, you see. I wanted my colleagues. With women, they told me sometimes that I was more severe with them. I said, maybe it's because I want you to achieve, and they all got a promotion. Because the men, you see, it's natural. They are in the working force for so long. But women must achieve. But it's difficult to be in power. The question of power is very, very somber.